Hi, I'm Tony Frazier, author, blogger, and near genius, and comic book fan. Now, if you've read comic books for any length of time, and by comic books at this point I'm speaking about the two main comic book universes, Marvel and DC, mainstream comics, you know that their histories can get kind of convoluted. To illustrate that, I'd like to take you through a journey through the origin of this guy, Nightwing. Nightwing is better known as Dick Grayson. Now, if you have been at all familiar with American culture in the last half century or more, you'll know that Dick Grayson was introduced in 1940 in the pages of Detective Comics as Robin, the Boy Wonder, Batman's sidekick. And he was Batman's inseparable partner for 29 years, until 1969, when DC Comics sent him away to college, at which point Batman became more of a solo act. Robin would make occasional guest appearances, but otherwise he was relegated to either a backup feature in the pages of Batman comics, or he was also part of a team called the Teen Titans, which was kind of a Justice League made up of sidekicks. Now, the important thing here to the story that we're telling is that in 1980, Marv Wolfman and George Perez, accent on the first E, revived the Teen Titans as the new Teen Titans, which allowed Robin to mature as a character and become a real leader and grow into a more adult version of himself. So that in 1984, he renounced the role of Robin and decided he needed to become his own man. Now, that doesn't mean that Robin was gone, because Robin is a trademarked character, and in order to maintain the trademark, DC Comics had to continue to publish the Robin character. So almost immediately after Robin renounced the suit, we got a new Robin in the form of Jason Todd. The fans weren't real thrilled by this new Robin. Number one, he was kind of whiny and annoying, and he made a lot of mistakes. And he was depicted as an actual kid, which even Dick Grayson hadn't been depicted as since the early 60s. And not only that, the fans didn't think that Batman really needed a Robin. After all, Batman had been flying mostly solo for 15 years now. For most young fans, their entire reading lives had been spent with Batman as a solo act. To them, Robin was a fluke of history, a mistake that had thankfully been corrected in 1969 and allowed Batman to go from being the jolly old Caped Crusader of that lame TV show in the 60s and become once again the Dark Knight that he was really destined to be. So when DC Comics gave fans the chance to kill off Jason Todd by calling a 1-900 number in the back cover of the comic, well, the outcome was never really in doubt. Robin snuffed it. But if fans thought that would get rid of Robin, they were sadly mistaken, because as I said, Robin is not so much a character as he is a property. And so DC retooled and came out with a new Robin, Tim Drake, who had a less goofy costume, and because his hair didn't part in the middle, his forehead wasn't doing this at you all the time like Jason Todd's, which just never seemed very manly. Right now the comics are on their 5th Robin, which is not counting the other imaginary Robins. Well, they're all imaginary, but the non-canon Robins, like the alternate universe Robins, the Robin of Earth 2, who had the worst costume in the world and got wiped out in an event that I'll talk about in just a little bit. It also doesn't count the alternate future Robins, like Carrie Kelly, the alternate future Robin from Frank Miller's Batman The Dark Knight Returns, or Bruce Wayne Jr. And by Bruce Wayne Jr., I mean Bruce Wayne Jr., who was Robin 2 to Dick Grayson's Batman 2 in an imaginary story written by Alfred, Batman's butler, in the 60s, and not the imaginary future Bruce Wayne Jr., who teamed up with imaginary future Clark Kent Jr. in World's Finest Comics in the mid-70s. But back to Dick Grayson. In 1984, during a Teen Titans storyline called The Judas Contract, Dick Grayson renounced the Robin identity once and for all and decided he needed to be his own man. And so he created a new identity. In issue 44. Ironically, 44 years after Robin was first introduced, he became this guy, Nightwing. And his justification for doing so was that he was going to pay tribute to the two men who had been most influential in his lives. Well, one look at the color scheme of Nightwing's new costume, and you understand that one of those men was, of course, Batman. But who was the other one? Well, for that we need to think back to the 1960s, and specifically Superman. Now, back in the 1950s, when writers were stuck with something for Superman to do, one of the things they would do was send him to the bottled city of Kandor. Now, Kandor was a Kryptonian city that had been shrunk down and kidnapped and kept as a souvenir in a bottle by the evil super android Brainiac, which Superman had rescued from Brainiac in his very first appearance, Brainiac's very first appearance. Superman kept the bottled city of Kandor at his Fortress of Solitude at the North Pole. Or was it the South Pole? Oh well. Occasionally, Superman would go on vacations to Kandor, where he would lose his superpowers and become just an ordinary person. This was apparently Superman's idea of a vacation. And on one of those vacations, he went to Kandor along with his friend Jimmy Olsen. Now, once they got there, they discovered that there was an organized ring of criminals operating. Superman decided, since he was a hero, that he would have to bring these criminals to justice. However, since he didn't have his superpowers, he decided to take a page from Batman's book. He designed a costume based on a Kryptonian bird known as the Nightwing, with a utility belt like Batman's full of super gadgets that he could use to fight crime. And he even had his own sidekick in the form of Jimmy, who dressed up as another Kryptonian bird called the Flame Bird. And so this dynamic duo of Kandor fought the criminals and brought the gang to justice. And that brings us back around to this guy, Robin, taking his name from Superman, pretending to be Batman. It was a great origin, one that not only paid tribute to the legacies of Superman and Batman, but also reminded you that Robin had been a central player in the DC Universe almost since its founding. Because in the 50s, when superheroes had virtually died out, DC, or National at the time, was only publishing 4 heroes as headliners: Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman and Robin. And in the character of Nightwing, they were able to pay homage to this legacy and to honor Robin's own central part in it, which served as a great origin for, about 6 months. Because at the same time that DC was running this storyline, they were also running this story, Crisis on Infinite Earths, a 12-part, one-year story that was going to wipe the slate clean of over 50 years of accumulated dross of DC continuity. It was going to simplify everything. It was going to get rid of all of the alternate universes that DC writers had created every time National acquired another company and added more characters to their stable. One result of the crisis was that DC rebooted Superman with the John Byrne miniseries Man of Steel, which is somewhere in these boxes behind me. With the reboot, they wiped that slate clean, and one of the things that got wiped was the bottled city of Kandor. With no bottled city of Kandor, there would be no Kandorian vacation with Jimmy, no Nightwing and Flamebird to inspire Dick Grayson to adopt the identity for himself. That meant that almost as soon as he adopted the role, or adopted the name, Dick Grayson had to find another justification for using it, or the writers at DC did. Now, is there a lesson we can learn from all this? I'm not sure there is, except that you can't get too wrapped around the axle debating the details of canon continuity, because these guys are having to make this stuff up at an amazing rate, and mistakes get made, and when they get made, they sometimes have to be taken back. I guess that's really all there is to say. If you like this, I can do more of it, and it'll probably only get better. It would just about have to. But this is kind of an experiment for me, and so let me know if you enjoyed it. Bye-bye.